10,000 years ago, something happened that almost every cat owner still gets completely backward. A deadly wild predator walked straight toward a human village, and nobody invited it. No one trapped it. No one trained it. No one even tried to tame it. Yet today, more than 600 million cats share our homes, and almost every one of them still carries the instincts of a wild hunter, which raises an almost impossible question. What could possibly convince one of nature's most independent predators to willingly live beside the loudest, messiest, most unpredictable species on Earth? The real story is far stranger, because the way most of us think cats became our companions is backwards. Because this isn't the story of humans domesticating cats. It's the story of cats quietly domesticating us. In fact, if there's a cat sleeping somewhere in your home right now, you're looking at the final chapter of a story that began 10,000 years ago. And it all began with a decision humans made for themselves, never realizing it would change the lives of cats forever. For hundreds of thousands of years, humans and wildcats lived side by side without ever becoming allies. They drank from the same rivers, hunted beneath the same skies, and passed each other countless times. Yet they remained strangers. Humans were constantly moving. Small bands of hunter-gatherers rarely stayed in one place for long. Their lives revolved around movement, following migrating animals, searching for edible plants, and carrying nearly everything they owned from one campsite to the next. To a wildcat, humans weren't an opportunity. They were simply another predator best avoided. There was no reward, only risk. For a solitary hunter, one bad decision could mean starvation. So caution became survival. That ancient survival instinct still lives in your home today. It's why even the friendliest cat, that is, the moment an unfamiliar face walks through the door, then everything changed. Humanity stopped chasing nature and started reshaping it. For the first time in history, humans stopped chasing food and convinced food to stay in one place. At first, it looked like humanity had solved its greatest problem. Fields gradually replaced stretches of wild land, and permanent villages began to appear. For the first time, people had something their ancestors had never been able to count on: extra food. For the first time, survival no longer depended entirely on tomorrow's hunt. But every solution creates a new problem. And this new way of life faced a problem that threatened to undermine it from the very beginning. Because the moment ancient farmers filled clay storage pits with grain, they unknowingly announced an endless buffet to thousands of hungry invaders. Mice, thousands of them. Imagine spending an entire year planting crops with nothing but stone tools, working under the scorching sun, protecting fields from drought, waiting months for harvest, only to wake up and discover that hungry rodents had eaten everything while you slept. This wasn't an annoyance. It was an existential threat. It was the difference between surviving the winter or starving before spring. Without those precious stores of grain, entire communities could disappear. And without villages, history might have unfolded very differently. Ancient farmers searched desperately for a solution. But while they were searching, something else had already noticed the feast. Hidden just beyond the edge of the firelight, two glowing eyes were locked on the mice. Neither the farmers nor the wildcat knew it yet, but they were about to begin one of the most successful partnerships in human history. The hunter hiding in the darkness wasn't stalking humans. It was stalking something much more valuable: the mice. While ancient farmers saw a disaster inside their grain stores, a patient hunter saw an opportunity. An endless buffet. Today, researchers believe that Quiet Hunter was the North African wildcat, the ancestor of nearly every house cat alive today. But don't picture a fluffy pet curled up on a windowsill. Picture a silent hunter. It could disappear into the shadows without making a sound. Its eyes were built for the night. Its hearing could detect the faint scratch of tiny claws beneath dry grass. And once it locked onto its target, the hunt was over in a heartbeat. For thousands of years, every mouse had to be hunted one at a time. Now those rodents were gathering in one place every single night. Human villages had accidentally built the greatest hunting ground a wildcat had ever seen. But getting close to humans came with one enormous risk. Wildcats don't survive by being brave. They survive by being careful. One wrong decision could mean death. So imagine that first approach. The village is quiet. The fires are burning low. Most people are asleep. A single wildcat waits just beyond the glow of the campfire. It doesn't rush in. It watches. It listens. It waits. Then it calculates. Then, almost without a sound, it slips between the storage huts. Moments later, another mouse is gone. The next night, it comes back then again and again, until something remarkable begins to happen. Over time, farmers would have noticed the change. Fewer sacks were destroyed. More grain survived the winter. The animal freezes. The human freezes. Neither one moves. For a heartbeat, fear outweighs curiosity. For a brief moment, both species are deciding whether the other is a threat or something else entirely. The farmer could throw a stone. He could chase the predator away forever. Or he could simply let it stay. Think about that moment, no contracts, no cages, no commands. Just two completely different species, realizing they benefited from each other's existence. Humans protected grain. Grain attracted mice. Mice attracted wildcats. And wildcats, without realizing it, protected the grain. Without speaking a single word, they had formed a partnership that benefited them both. But the real surprise wasn't that they kept returning. It was the time they chose to appear. Almost always after sunset. And that reveals something fascinating about ancient human life that most people never think about. When darkness fell, early villages transformed, the exhausting work of farming finally stopped. Families gathered around glowing fires. Stories filled the night. Children laughed. Music echoed across the settlement. Some archaeological evidence even suggests that fermented grain drinks were already being enjoyed in certain early farming communities thousands of years before written history. The villages became noisy, bright, alive. Ironically, all that human activity made the area safer for a small nocturnal hunter. Firelight kept larger predators at a distance, while grain and insects drew in exactly the kinds of small animals a wildcat loved to hunt. Everything a wildcat needed existed within a few hundred feet. Night after night, the distance between humans and wildcats grew a little smaller. Neither side planned it. Neither side understood it. But with every new litter of kittens born a little closer to people, evolution was quietly running an experiment, and the results would quietly reshape the future of both species. Without anyone noticing it, something extraordinary was already happening. Not because humans were changing the cats, but because the cats were slowly changing themselves. Every night, dozens of wildcats approached the edges of human settlements. Some couldn't handle it. The smell of smoke, human voices, sudden movement, the constant noise of village life. The slightest movement sent them racing back into the darkness. Those cats returned to the wild, where every meal was uncertain, and every hunt carried risk. But a few were different. They were naturally a little calmer, a little less fearful, curious enough to wait instead of run. Those tiny differences changed everything. The cats that tolerated humans caught more mice. They survived more often. They raised more kittens, nellisation after generation. Those kittens inherited the same calm temperament. No human selected them. No one bred them on purpose. Natural selection did all the work. In a strange way, the grain stores were deciding which cats would survive and which wouldn't. And the cats were choosing us. This wasn't domestication in the way most people imagine it. It was evolution quietly unfolding at the edge of civilization. Neither species understood it at the time, but together they were reshaping each other's future. Then came the moment that transformed a working relationship into something deeply emotional. The kittens. Unlike adult wildcats, kittens born near human villages experience people from their very first days of life. Human voices became normal. The smell of smoke became familiar. Footsteps no longer meant danger. Fear slowly gave way to curiosity. Now imagine one of those kittens wandering a little too close to the village. A child notices it. The tiny animal freezes. Its ears flatten. Its heart races. Instead of throwing a rock, the child kneels down. Maybe they leave behind a scrap of food. Or maybe, for the first time, they choose not to scare it away. Day after day, the distance grows smaller. One careful step at a time. That simple moment, repeated countless times over generations, may have changed history more than anyone realized, because for the first time, a wild predator wasn't valued only for what it could do. For the first time, its presence mattered just as much as its usefulness. And then archaeologists uncovered a discovery that proved this bond had become something far greater than survival. On the island of Cyprus, where no native wildcats existed, researchers found a burial dating back roughly 9,500 years. Beside the human skeleton lay a cat, carefully placed as if it still belonged there. That cat hadn't wandered onto the island by itself. Someone had carried it across open water in a boat. Think about what that means. in an age when every trip across the sea was dangerous. Someone believed this animal was worth the risk, and when death finally came, they refused to leave it behind. That wasn't survival anymore, it was companionship. Yet here's the twist that makes this story unforgettable. Despite living beside us for nearly 10,000 years, cats remain astonishingly close to their wild ancestors. Their bodies have changed very little. Their hunting instincts are still razor sharp. Even the cat sleeping peacefully on your couch still carries the mind of a patient predator. That's why a toy mouse, a fluttering shadow, or even a laser dot can instantly awaken instincts older than civilization itself. Unlike dogs, which humans shaped through intensive breeding into hundreds of specialized forms, cats largely followed a different path. Researchers generally agree that they domesticated themselves by exploiting the opportunities humans unintentionally created. In other words, they stayed because it benefited them. And perhaps that's the most fascinating lesson of all. We like to believe humans are always the ones in control, that we're the ones making every important choice. But one of the oldest relationships in your home tells a different story. A wild hunter looked at our noisy villages, our overflowing grain stores, and our chaotic lives, and decided we were useful enough to keep around. So the next time your cat ignores you, or jumps onto your lap only when it feels like it, remember this. Maybe it isn't forgetting its wild past. Maybe it's reminding us how this partnership truly began. After all, we never really adopted the cat. The cat adopted us.